For the last 20 years, my colleagues and I have been applying knowledge from the learning sciences to build a new kind of educational assessment infrastructure. For the first 10 years, I saw myself primarily as an academic. During the last 10 years, I've gradually come to see myself as a test developer. For all of these 20 years, I've dedicated my life to bringing a new kind of educational assessment into the world. Although I can genuinely claim that this is one of the most gratifying efforts I've ever been involved in, it's been difficult, requiring a great deal of self-sacrifice, not just on my part. For the first 10 years, most people simply rolled their eyes when they heard what we were up to. And even though our organization is a nonprofit, we've had very little support from funders. We've found that most donors who dislike what's happening with high-stakes testing aren't interested in supporting any kind of testing. Really, we've succeeded through sheer stubbornness and confidence in our vision. In this talk, I'll be describing the rationale for our assessments, one that prioritizes optimizing the learning experience of individuals while serving other legitimate assessment needs, such as the measurement of learning progress and evaluating curricula. I'll describe the perspective on learning, which comes from both the learning sciences and on-the-ground experience that lies at the core of lectical assessments. Explain what this means for our assessment goals. Describe the developmental model that made it possible to create lectical assessments, and discuss a few opportunities for your involvement in our research and in helping us to achieve our nonprofit mission to deliver the most sophisticated educational assessments ever made, free of charge, to individual classroom teachers everywhere. By the way, I know the claim that our assessments are the most sophisticated assessments ever created sounds grandiose, but I promise you that despite similarities with many good formative assessments, the methods and technology used to produce lectical assessments represent a major advance. I didn't provide this background information to complain. I provided it to set you up for the happy announcement that within the next 2 to 3 months, assuming we can continue to keep the wolf at bay, we'll be releasing a free online demonstration of the very first electronically scored lectical assessments. And if our efforts to raise the last $50,000 required to fund development are successful, in 12 months we'll be releasing the first electronically scored disco test, the 4th to 12th grade version of our reflective judgment, absolutely free to individual teachers all over the world. During this presentation, I'll be covering quite a bit of territory. I'll do my best to speak to the research, for those of you who are academics, as I weave what I hope will also be a compelling account for those of you who are primarily interested in what lectical assessments can do for your students. Before we dive in, I want to make sure everyone in the room knows what a lectical assessment is. Lectical assessments are research-based formative assessments that are designed primarily to optimize learning, support the development of essential learning and thinking skills, and reward teaching that supports optimal learning. Because they're based on rigorous ongoing research into how targeted concepts and skills develop over time, lectical assessments also include detailed and actionable diagnostic feedback, including just right learning recommendations and resources. And unlike other standardized assessments, which are standardized statistically, lectical assessments are also calibrated to a theoretically derived and extensively validated developmental scale. I'll begin with some insights from my first career as a midwife. You meet a lot of babies as a midwife. I caught over 500, so there were many opportunities for what I think of as collateral learning. One phenomenon that has held my attention for over 30 years is that all healthy babies learn to walk. Of course, we all take this for granted, but if you've had the joy of witnessing this phenomenon, you'll know exactly what I mean when I say it hurts. And there's lots of failure, way more failure than success for most would-be toddlers. Yet these babies not only persist in their efforts, they act as if they're hopelessly addicted to learning to walk, and addicted to learning of all kinds. I don't think anyone fully understands what makes these babies so successful at mastering this very difficult skill. But we do know a few things, and they involve what's called the dopamine opioid cycle. Yes, the same cycle that's implicated in addiction. Many years after my midwifery career ended, I discovered that the learning process I'd observed in babies who were learning to walk involved the same dopamine opioid cycle brain scientists have observed in addiction. Like most processes in the brain, addiction involves complex interactions between multiple parts of the brain, including those associated with emotion and thought. I'm not even going to try to explain all of those interactions, but I do want to make a simple point about the role of the dopamine opioid cycle in learning. Here's a simplified model. When a learning goal is just right, not too easy and not too hard, efforts to meet the goal act as little tests or trials. When these efforts lead to success just often enough, apparently it's best not to succeed every time, pleasure hormones called opioids are released by the brain. The opioids trigger the release of dopamine, the striving hormone, which motivates us to set another goal. We make a new effort equipped with what we've learned from previous trials. By the way, we call the zone in which the challenge is just right the Goldilocks zone. The cycle shown here will repeat indefinitely as long as enough of our learning challenges are in the Goldilocks zone. The goals babies set for themselves are incremental. We don't go from crawling to walking in one step. We build the skill over time with practice, experimentation, and support from others, using the feedback from dozens of trials to continuously recalibrate our goals. Imagine what we could do for learning if we could recruit the dopamine opioid cycle every day for every student in the classroom. To leverage the dopamine opioid cycle and keep kids addicted to learning, testing must play its part in the natural learning cycle we observed in babies. We call this cycle the virtuous cycle of learning, or VCAL. I want to acknowledge that we're far from the first to recognize this cycle. It's part of many 20th century learning models and is largely responsible for the formative assessment movement. VCALs are cycles of goal setting, information gathering, application, and reflection. Our assessments foster virtuous cycles of learning in two ways. First, the assessments themselves are part of a VCAL. When people take a lectical assessment, they're asked to apply what they've learned so far by answering a series of probing questions. The assessment report provides an opportunity for them to reflect on their assessment results and set new goals. Second, the learning recommendations in the report are designed to help learners and educators to create several VCALs. An important feature of these recommendations is that they're based on what the assessment score tells us about the test taker's learning sweet spot, or edge. At Lectica, we call this the Goldilocks zone. This is the zone in which all of us are most likely to enjoy and benefit from learning. And all of these learning cycles contribute to the construction of a vast dynamic network of connections in the brain that's updated every time we complete a cycle. For babies who are learning to walk, this means that walking becomes a skill that will never be forgotten, barring severe brain injury. What's more, it's a skill that can be put to work and built upon. Once we've mastered walking, we can learn to run, skip, and jump. We call this kind of learning robust learning, and it's the kind of learning we believe all educational assessments should be designed to support. Research from the learning sciences has shown that VCALs work best when we use them to practice what we call the +7 learning skills. These skills include seeking and evaluating information, applying knowledge, seeking and making use of feedback, reflection and analysis, making connections, mindfulness, and awareness of our built-in biases. The reports of all lectical assessments include recommendations that require completing VCALs and exercising multiple +7 skills. We think of robust knowledge as knowledge that provides the foundation for a lifetime of learning and development. How do we know when knowledge is robust? Well, it's not by looking for right answers. Right answers tell us what students have committed to memory, but they do not tell us if their knowledge is well enough networked to be robust. In fact, the kind of knowledge we gain when we memorize without deep understanding doesn't stay with us, as Schwartz and his colleagues showed us in their study of depth versus breadth. We also can't tell how robust knowledge is by looking at the terminology students use or the memorized definitions they can repeat. Students can learn words and their definitions without understanding their meaning. Just as facts and procedures that are memorized tend to get lost, so do the words students learn, unless these words are connected to deep understanding. The evidence for robust learning lies in 6 features of students' work: its clarity, precision, the quality of explanations, its complexity, and students' capacity for self-evaluation. In order to observe these things, we must examine students' written and oral arguments and their ability to apply what they have learned in real-world contexts. Clarity is evidence of deep understanding, because we cannot make clear statements unless we understand what we're talking about. Similarly, precision is evidence of deep understanding, because the better we understand what we're learning, the more nuanced our explanations can become. For example, when we understand that evidence is composed of multiple facts and other types of information, we are less likely to use the words facts and evidence interchangeably. The third source of evidence for deep understanding is being able to explain your answers. In fact, as we all know, it can be quite difficult to explain even what you do understand. The fourth source of evidence for deep learning is the ability to apply what you have learned. The quality of an application is a direct indicator of depth learning and is likely to precede the ability to explain. We're in the process of writing up the results of a large longitudinal study in which we investigated the long-term impacts of failing to learn robustly. To do this, we annually evaluated students' argumentation by rating the clarity, precision, and quality of explanation in students' assessment answers. We found that students who exhibited poor argumentation developed slowly relative to those who made more coherent arguments. For students whose argumentation skills did not improve over time, the prospects are not good. Our models suggest that many of these students are likely to stop developing at around grade 9. This pattern is most common in students who have average scores in early grades and in schools that spend the most time prepping for state tests. The fifth source of evidence for robust learning is complexity. We turned to a strong developmental scale called the skill scale from Harvard's Dr. Kurt Fisher to help us learn how to evaluate the complexity of students' answers. During the 20th century, beginning with Baldwin and Piaget, dozens of educational researchers began to talk about learning and development as a kind of spiral in which each new level of understanding builds upon the knowledge networks constructed at prior levels. In other words, thinking at each successive level becomes more complex. We call this scale the lectical scale, but you can also think of it as a refinement of Fisher's skill scale. The skill scale has 13 levels, starting with 0, and runs from birth through adulthood. Here, I'm going to be focusing on levels 5 through 12, which are the levels we work with most often. We'll begin with level 5, which is the level during which we learn to crawl, walk, feed ourselves, and try to control aspects of our social world. For example, babies start to gesture near the end of this level, with signals that mean things like, "Look there, I want that," and "Pick me up." A few words also emerge at this level, such as the names of familiar objects, animals, or people, as well as words for those gestures I just mentioned. After they've mastered the skills of level 5, young children, usually at around age 2, transition into level 6. In this level, they learn a great deal about their physical and social worlds. They also learn the names of many things in their world, including the primary colors and basic feelings like happy, sad, and mad. By the end of level 6, they can even describe what they're feeling or doing in short, often grammatically correct, sentences. Children usually move from level 6 into level 7 sometime between their 3rd and 4th birthdays. During level 7, children achieve a number of advances in social understanding, like knowing the difference between truths and lies or what it means to keep a secret. They also produce longer sentences and are able to use conjunctions like then, but, and because to connect ideas. Their understanding of numbers also grows. They can now do simple addition with the help of fingers and toes. Most children transition into level 8 in their 7th year. This is the level in which reading usually takes off and basic arithmetic really starts to make sense. It's also the level in which children begin to tell detailed stories about present, past, or anticipated events. Many of these are stories about social interactions, especially with best friends. By age 9, most children have made the transition into level 9. In this level, thinking undergoes a major change from what's called concrete thinking to abstract thinking. This shows up in how children talk about friendship. Rather than telling a story about how they feel after being lied to by a particular friend, as they would in level 8, children performing in level 9 can sum up how they feel about lying in a general statement, like, "It's not much fun to be friends with people who lie to you." In this level, children also build other ideas about the nature of friendship and begin to understand several other abstract concepts like facts, evidence, opinions, perspectives, and persuasion. By age 13, most teens have transitioned into level 10. In this level, they're able to build a reasonable understanding of many important science, mathematical, and social concepts, and to apply those concepts in real-world contexts. This is because they can now see logical relations between the kind of abstract ideas they began to develop in level 9. For example, they are able to make a connection between being labeled as a liar and maintaining a good reputation, or between the motives of a researcher and the objectivity of her research. Unlike levels 0 to 10, level 11 does not emerge routinely in a particular age range. In fact, level 11 is not even the most common level in adulthood. That distinction belongs to level 10. But level 11 is catching up, partly because the complexity of adult life in the 21st century demands more than the ability to see logical relations between a few variables. With the exception of entry-level service or labor positions, most jobs today involve a lot of complexity. In Level 11, people build the skills for coping with this complexity by gradually developing the ability to identify and work with systems of relations between multiple variables. By the way, a little bit of growth in Level 11 goes a long way. For example, the difference between the skills needed in a typical mid-level management position and an upper-level position is only about 1/5 of a level. A few highly motivated and talented individuals with an intense love of learning continue to develop beyond Level 11 and into Level 12. Usually, development into Level 12 requires building deep expertise in at least 2 knowledge areas. This is because the kind of ideas that emerge in Level 12 result from connecting multiple complex bodies of knowledge. Darwin did it with his theory of natural selection, which integrated geology and biology. Einstein did it with a theory of relativity, which integrated mathematics and theoretical physics. And Steve Jobs did it with Apple by successfully integrating technology, design, and marketing. During the last 20 years, we've been refining a human scoring system based on the lectical scale, and using it to build assessments and inform the development of what we call the lectical dictionary. This is a developmental dictionary in which each word or phrase has been assigned to a developmental phase, 1/4 of a lectical level, based on the first phase in which the word or phrase is likely to be useful. Today, the dictionary includes about 100,000 entries, starting with first speech. One day, it will include millions of entries. It's taken 20 years to develop this dictionary because we needed a large corpus of scored material to create it. Each time we create a new assessment, we incorporate new language into this dictionary, which forms the basis for CLASS, the electronic scoring system I spoke about at the beginning of this talk. And each time one of our assessments is taken, CLASS will learn something new about usage. Here's an example of what we mean about usage and how it relates to development. We have documented usage of the term evidence from the first phase in which it appears in use through Level 12. The term is first used sensibly in the second phase of Level 9, which we call 9B. In this level, the word evidence is used interchangeably with words like facts, proof, and information. It's something you have, and if you have it, you're right. In Phase 9C, evidence consists of things like information, facts, and data. You use it to prove something. It's something you need a lot of, and you can use it to convince others. By Phase 9D, the understanding of what evidence is has become more nuanced. There are different kinds and different levels of quality. And if it's the right kind, you can use it to support or back up an opinion. All of these changes in the meaning of evidence are associated with different ways of using the term. Now, I'd like you to imagine a dictionary in which the usage of every word in the English language has been studied and documented in this way. That's what the lectical dictionary is well on its way to becoming. The sixth source of evidence for robust learning is the accuracy of a person's ability to self-evaluate. Beginning with the first assessment we release in the coming year, all test takers will be required to participate in a self-evaluation prior to viewing their report. Teachers will be able to track the quality of these self-evaluations over time and provide feedback that helps students improve their accuracy. This feedback will let our system know when it's time to increase the level of challenge by asking students to do more difficult self-evaluation tasks. Lectical assessments target all 6 of the sources of evidence for robust knowledge, and they not only help teachers measure these outcomes, they support the development of robust knowledge and the learning skills required to build it. Now I'm going to turn to a brief account of research outcomes I haven't yet reported here. These research outcomes all relate to scores on the lectical scale. In addition to telling us how a student with a particular lectical score on a particular assessment is likely to understand and work with its targeted constructs, lectical level has been shown to predict a number of other outcomes. For example, academic success, including GPA, advancement in the workplace, subordinates' ratings of leaders' decision-making behavior, some perspective taking and seeking skills, decision-making skill, and literacy. Lectical growth, on the other hand, has been shown to predict subordinates' ratings of leaders' decision-making behavior, and to be predicted by the formative use of lectical assessments, the quality of perspectival skills, learning a second language in elementary school, and the amount of reflective analytical activity that takes place in general or in the classroom. So far, lectical growth does not appear to be predicted by standardized test scores. If you're interested in seeing citations, please contact us. Well, we've come very close to the end of this presentation. I hope you found the information useful. I was asked to make suggestions for ways in which we would like to work with others to advance Lectica's mission, so I've come up with a few suggestions. I haven't yet mentioned DiscoTest. It's the name we have given to our nonprofit mission to provide our assessments free of charge to individual teachers everywhere. All of the suggestions here apply to the DiscoTest mission. First, we could urgently use some help with fundraising. We're planning a crowdfunding campaign around the class demo that's launching this spring, and boy, are we amateurs in this area. Second, we are about $50,000 short of the funds we need to make our assessments available to teachers. We're building our state-of-the-art platform for less than 1/10 of market rates. We're very lean, but it still isn't free. We can't start sharing what we've created until the platform is finished. Third, we'd like to do about 24 more program evaluations for a wide range of schools. These evaluations will help us set benchmarks, which will be essential for marketing purposes once the platform is up. We can absorb about half the cost of evaluations. Fourth, we want to show off what the best schools are achieving when it comes to robust learning. Again, we can share the cost. Fifth, we need a list of teachers who want to start using our reflective judgment assessment when it launches in 2017. If you're interested, all you need to do is add yourself to our newsletter list at lectica.org. Sixth, we're planning to develop a MOOC so educators everywhere can learn how to use lectical assessments to support learning. We're looking for potential partners. And finally, you can help us complete unfinished lectical assessments as one of our research schools. If you'd like to help, or we can help you, please contact us at lectica.org.